Most people think prison is about survival, which it is. But there are also complete and total underground ecosystems working within and behind those walls. And in today's episode, I'm going to break down for you one of the most organized and complex hustles there is in the prison system. And what is that, you ask? It is how to run a compound-wide sports gambling parlay operation.
Back is back in shotgun. He takes the snap. He's looking downfield. He throws. It's caught. Touchdown.
I'm going to take you step by step through how you assess the logistics of the compound, how you pick your partners, how you create the tickets, how money and tickets move across a lockdown facility, and run the entire operation. This was not just a gambling operation. This was business. The entrepreneurial mindset truly knows no boundaries. So stick with me here on this one, because we're going to go deep. We're going to go real deep. Step 1, studying the compound. Before you do anything, you want to survey the lay of the land. You want to be able to know if this is even a feasible possibility to run an operation like this at the camp that you're at. You want to see who the competitors are. Not exactly a bad thing if there are competitors, because that means it's already working and you're not going to be the only target on the yard. You're going to need to study the movement of the camp. You're going to want to know who works what details, when they work those details. You're going to want to observe and see how people move around, how things get moved around. You need to know all these details if you're going to run an operation like this. What guards are cool, what guards are not cool, when these guards work. All of these things, very important. You're going to want to create a full logistics report on this, because remember, you're going to sit there and you're going to have to get tickets out. You're going to have to get master sheets back in. You're going to have to be able to move money from dorm to dorm and get money from those dorms back to your dorm. You're going to have to sit there and move bulky items, because money in the prison system is store items, which means honey buns, soups, mackerel, back in the day, jars of coffee, cigarettes, all that stuff. You got to be able to get these things from wherever they're at in these different dormitories to your dormitory. And if a hit occurs in another dormitory and your runner's not going to be able to cover it with the kitty that you have in there, you got to be able to get word down to him to bag up to the person in the dorm next to him to bag up that money and be able to shuffle it over to his dorm to be able to cover those bets. Because no matter what, you got to cover those bets. That is the primary thing. You accomplish that and are able to keep the bets paid without any kind of problems and any kind of issues. Guards tend to overlook things. Administration tends to overlook things. Because when the guys are sitting there gambling and enjoying their weekends, they're not fighting, they're not making shanks, they're not stabbing each other. The only thing that has to happen is when those tickets hit, they get paid. Easy business. But it's really not. There's a lot that goes into this. Some of the bread and butter ways to do this is your ice man, your trash man, sanitation workers, sometimes the painting crew. And then sometimes you got to be resourceful. You just got to make things happen. You got to sit there and be able to holler at some dudes and get them to just be able to tote that stuff. Or you got to organize it so you can get out on the yard, big yard, small yard at the same time, get the money out, get it handed off, and get it brought back to that person's dorm. You got to make things happen. You got to be able to work things. And one of the most important things is step 2, building the operation. Who gets a seat at the table and who your runners are some of the most important things. This is the make or break you, is the team you put together. For your partners, you're going to want at least 1 or 2 other partners.
Back in shotgun. He takes the snap. He's looking downfield. He throws. It's caught. Touchdown.
Ideally, each one should be highly skilled in a different area. They should also, of course, be trustworthy, loyal, straight up business dudes. No BS. You could have fun. You could have a good time. But serious, straight up people. and ultimately loyal. As for the runners, of course, they have to be trustworthy, loyal, stand up, all that kind of stuff too. However, they also have to be extremely competent, good salespeople.
You guys are easy money.
You want them to have creative problem solving skills, to be critical thinkers who can get the job done because you're just passing word on to them and giving them instructions on what to do, and then they're having to represent and carry on what you're teaching them or telling them to do in the different dormitories they are. So they're actually like kind of like separate workers for you in other dormitories living in completely other areas. So these people are extremely important. If you and your partners are the fuel that run the whole machine, they are the engine that makes that thing go. So the runners are of the absolute utmost importance. Alongside your runners, you may have to employ a mover. However, a lot of times there's ways you can kind of move around having to do that. You could just have your runners be able to accomplish a lot of the things. But if the place you're at, you're not able to do that, you may also have to throw out a little bit of money for somebody who's just going to be able to move things around, get those big bags of items from this spot to that spot. It's just the name of the game sometimes. You got to just feel it out as it works. Step 3, how the operation works. At a high level, this is a simple operation, but it's the execution of this operation that either makes you or breaks you. You have you and 2 other partners. You guys are splitting this after everybody else gets paid, all the bets get paid, all of that gets taken care of 3 ways. So everybody's getting an even cut amongst the 3 of you. The runners, you're paying your runners 25% off the top. Whatever they pull in, doesn't matter if you get hit and lose money. Whatever they pull in off the absolute top, they're getting 25% off of. So the whole thing is based off of an incentive package type of method of payment. So the more they make, the more action they bring to you. Because the more action you get, the more you really end up keeping. That's really how it usually ends up going. As long as you know what you're doing with the lines. More on that later. And why do you want the maximum amount of action possible? Because you have to win one game. The minimum amount of plays that a player can play is a 4-pick. And then the odds get even worse if they play for them, if they play a 5-pick, 6-pick, 7-pick, 8-pick, 9-pick. But a 4-pick is the best odds for them. And if they play that, they have to win all 4 games without a loss or a tie. If they lose or tie any one of those 4 games, you get to keep the money. The true odds on this is 16-1. But in the prison system, we're only paying 8-1 or 10-1, depending on how many other tickets are on the compound. That's it. Automatic built-in VIG. Beautiful. And for the people who play the 5-pick, 6-pick, it gets even worse for them. More on that in a second. Now, the only other person you might have in this operation that you are paying is your mover. And that's going to be either an ice man, trash man, painting crew, sanitation guy, somebody of that nature who can move things around and get things around. But like I said, a lot of the times you don't even need them. And a little trick to the trade is a lot of the times you just, if one of them is a relatively stand-up type person who has that type of job, you end up making him a runner in the dormitory that he's in. And it's always a privilege to be a runner.
What are the numbers for today's draw?
Right here, boss. Looks like a big take.
Because they basically have a gravy train job and they're also got something to do. They got some action, man. So you can always spark that deal with them with, hey, look, move the stuff around when you can. I'll throw you an extra bag of coffee and then I'll let you run the ticket in the dorm. There you go. So Might even not even have to throw in the extra bag of coffee because people just like to be in on stuff. Just how it works. You know, everywhere you can save is also a nice little added earning. You also might have somebody who's going to be working and writing out the tickets for you. You give them a nice little template. You supply them up with carbon paper. You pay them like a penny a ticket. They write out all the tickets. Not really a needed thing, but definitely a nice thing because you might be writing out a couple of hundred tickets. And even though they're getting to make like maybe 21 tickets on one page of paper, and then they're multiplying it by like 4 pages of paper deep because of using the carbon paper in between so they can kind of, maximize it out. It's still a slight pain. So paying the penny a ticket is a lot of times just a nice little convenience. Not necessary, but a convenience. Now that you have the gist of how that works, step 4, spreads, tickets, and payments. Now for the spreads, there's a lot of different ways to formulate the spreads. One of the main things is we would always have subscriptions to different pamphlets, magazines, newspapers, and use those. Magazines and newspapers and pamphlets like Mark Lawrence's playbook, magnificent. The gold sheets, the platinum sheets, USA Today is a must-have, and just a variety of different one-off articles and magazines that you can pick up on sports, just to be able to keep a overall knowledge base of what's going on and what's happening in all of the sports. Now, a lot of it's going to end up coming down to intuition. So you're going to just take all of these bits of information in. There are, depending on which sport it is that you're focused on, different ways. Like for NFL, you just get a line and then you just have to know the players and know the game in order to make adjustments to those lines. But this is also why you want to have one person on your team as far as your 3 heads.
Field, he throws, it's caught, touchdown.
Specialist in pro, one that's a specialist in college, and one that's like a extremely knowledgeable specialist in both. Now, by the end of it, you're all going to really be very adept at all the sports, but if you could have at least one specialist in pro, one specialist in college, and one who's really good at both, you're going to do really good with being able to make those lines because you're going to be sitting down together as like a team, figuring it out, putting it together to run them lines. Let's talk NFL football. For instance, with NFL football, you don't want to vary too far off from the spread because then you end up kind of like gambling on your tickets, which if you're good and you really know your stuff, you can use some techniques in order to push action in a certain direction. Although a lot of the times the compound will start to figure it out if all of a sudden you keep putting these bets out. I'm not going to exactly say what we called it when we did this, but we were really good at it. And when you would put these bets out, what you're doing is you're one-siding the action because you're moving the line off of the newspaper to a relatively far degree because you have an extremely strong read that it's going to go this way. And what ends up happening is the compound usually has the feeling of, oh, these guys think they know more than Vegas. So what they do is they're like, oh, free money.
You guys are easy money.
And they're going to go and they're going to all jump on that game the way that you want them because they're going to think that you just moved this line too far off, so they're getting like an advantage. And this works where all of a sudden you only have a couple of players playing on your side along with you, and you'll have the ticket where almost everybody else will be playing on the other side against you, and then you end up where there's like 100 people, let's say, play that game. 95 of them went the other way, 5 of them went your way, so one game you just killed 95 tickets. That's beautiful. Now, if you don't know what you're doing and you push that out there, then what ends up happening is you got 95 tickets riding on you. So there's a danger with trying to sit there and do that. Also, you can't get away with this too many times because if you make that big line push and all of a sudden you kill everybody, and you make that big line push and you kill everybody, and you make that big line push and you kill everybody, the next time you make that big line push, all of a sudden you're going to have all these guys riding with you. So you can overplay it. There's the ebb and a flow here. But for a basic gist, you want to run a line that's going to be a close to middle ground and get even action. So if you've got 100 plays, you want 50 on this side and 50 on that side. So that way, the outcomes are, if this team wins, there's 50 winners and there's 50 losers. If this team wins, there's 50 winners and there's 50 losers. Or it's a tie and you killed all 100. That's an ideal situation because then there's 3 other games that those 50 that are survived have got to now play against you. So a split is better because if you have a situation where you have like 90 one way, 10 this way, and it's just that was Vegas's line and that was how everybody ended up riding on that game, you could end up with the lock that kills everything. However, you could also very easily end up with 90 riding that way. And you only killed 10 tickets. So that's the way it goes, though, because you don't want to go too far, because if you go too far with pushing your line, you will push the bets. Now, for making those lines, there's certain numbers that you want to use because you want those locks or like a split divide of action on that bet. So what you do is you're using 3s, 4s, 7s, 10s, sometimes 11s, and 14s. For the majority of the times, those are going to be the lines you're going to make because those are the most likely numbers that are going to fall directly on. You'll never have a half point when you're running a parlay. Also, in the prison system and in the prison system only, I don't think they do this at all anywhere but the prison system. And you can't overdo it. You'll usually have on each ticket maybe 2 what we called pick 3s. A pick 3 meant no matter which way the player plays, either, so it's one game, if they play this team or if they play this team, is -3. So they can't get plus points on that game. Now, the tickets I've seen that really were just kind of like just running a ticket and didn't really know what they were doing, but they had money to back, so they were able to do this, would usually just make that whatever games seem to be the closest. The smarter way to do it is whatever game where you have a strong read that the dog is going to be the one that's going to win that game. In other words, Vegas's idea of who's -2 or -3 or whatever, small home dog is a powerful thing. That team is the game, or that game is the game that you would make the pick 3, because then nobody's going to take the underdog because they'd have to give up 3. So if anybody's going to bet on that game, the only way they're going to bet is with the favorite, which if you're right, you're going to kill it. If it's within those 3, you're going to kill it because no matter what anybody did, they're -3. So that was just an added little like technique or tactic that gets worked in the prison system, but not really anywhere else. Now, I really don't want to go too far into the whole line thing, the odds making, because I could go crazy deep on that. So I want to keep this more on the actual operational working flow of how you run one of these operations in the prison system. So that's what we're going to stick with. So for the tickets, they'd be small pieces of paper that would have the operational name, a TL, which would stand for ties and losses, and a FS, which would stand for final score, along the top of them. You know, you've got to cut down on arguments or any type of BS in every possible way. So you've got to sit there and have it like you can't argue. For the actual lines themselves, as far as the games, you'd have a game where it's a team, and then in the center you'd have the line, and then you'd have another team name. So all the games are team, number in the middle, team. And then to the left or the right of that number, you will, and this is a key, only put the pluses. Why? Because again, you can have issues of people trying to play game, because a minus easily becomes a plus. But if the only thing you use is pluses, way more difficult. The pick threes is the threes written in the middle, and you have a little line and a little line next to it. It's clearly two little minuses. That's your pick three. Or some people would just put a PK in the middle for just pick, and then it's no possible screwball with. Also, what we would always do is put all of the teams along like the right side that are plus points. So you've got all the teams along the right side with plus points, plus you have the plus written between them and the number, just to cut down on any possibilities of any kind of BS. And at the bottom of the ticket, you would have all of the odds of what they can play and what it pays out. And at the very, very bottom, there would be a time for when the tickets are due. For instance, noon Sunday. So that's the layout of the ticket. Now for the master sheets. The master sheets are one of the most absolute important things because this is where all the action is. All of your runners who are all over the compound and all the different dormitories, all of them are going to have their own kiddies in the dorm, and they're going to be running and taking in all the bets. All those bets that they take in are going to be going onto the master sheet, which is going to be a relatively small piece of paper. They're going to make a copy of it to send up to you. This piece of paper is going to have all of the bets. So it has, for instance, like the team, the next team, the next team, the next team, if it was a 4-pick, and then next to that, it'll have the amount that's played on it and the person's name. So if it's a 5-pick, there'll be 5 of them. If it's a 6-pick, there'll be 6 of them. And then that is how they're booking all of the bets that they're taking in. Then they themselves hold on to the small little individual tickets as like proof evidence of the bets. But the only thing that you're going off of is that big sheet. So you in your dormitory will be receiving at noon from all these other dormitories all these sheets coming in. And on those sheets, it's got all the action, like I said. And then at the bottom part of the sheet, you have bank, and that's where they're going to write the amount that's already in their kitty before this action for this game, or this day's worth of games. Then underneath that, it's going to have the take of what they just took in. Then underneath that, it's going to have their cut. So you see their cut. And then underneath that, it's going to have what's in the kitty right now. So, because after they're cut, that kitty is going to be a smaller number. Now, once you have that information, you now have all these different sheets. You know exactly what's going on in all these different dormitories. The bets that you cover are the bets that are on these sheets. That's the way you keep track of the whole operation. If a bet isn't on that master sheet, that bet does not exist. That's how that works. Now, this whole operation, it takes bookkeeping skills too, including you also on your own have to have your own set of books where you're keeping track of what's going on in all these dormitories. Because you may have like A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Each one of these dormitories, you've got its own specific individual runner in it. So you've got to know after everything happens, who has what amount of money in their dorms. So you keep track of all of that. So you have a nice solid weekly guide so you know what the money's looking like in each dorm, because sometimes you have to like shuffle the money around because one of the kiddies might be getting low, so you got to shuffle money over to that one. Or if, let's say, you wanted to just keep a steady rate of like $75 in each dorm, you shuffle them around during the week so you get everything to where it's got $75 in each dorm, and then everything over that from each one of them you pull up to where you're at. Then there's another whole process of how you can turn those store items into cash that I will get into in another video, because I don't want to go too crazy. This is already pretty long here. And with all that said, this one I know is a little bit different. Of course, in no way, shape, and form am I trying to say, hey, the prison system is a good thing, or it is absolutely not in any way, shape, and form good. It is totally horrible, totally sucks. But if you're in there, you might as well make the most of it by trying to learn something. And apply some skills that you could possibly use in an arena that is not the prison system, which running a gambling operation, I don't know, but the whole part of like running all of that, learning all of that, and doing all of that, it's got to help somewhere, right? So this one was a little bit different, a little bit off my normal fitness stuff. If you like the prison vibe and the prison stories like this, let me know, drop it in a comment. Peace, love, joy, all that good stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one.